I received an email from someone who is ostensibly, if not actually, the person who turned Vegan Gains into the cops, and who made Richard's life miserable for a couple of years there. So I received this email a couple of years ago, and everything about this email, I'm going to read it to you, is believable. Does that mean that it's true? No. As I said originally, ostensibly, this is an account from the perspective of the person who made the decision to report Richard to the Toronto Police Department that led to a series of investigations and charges that led to Richard having to attend several court dates. The nature of the email I'm going to read you, I would say, is believable enough and boring enough that you could ask yourself, well, if this were a hoax, what would be different from an actual account of the events? Call me gullible. I do regard this email as credible, and if I'm wrong, you guys have been duly warned and informed. I don't have a lot of other content to provide in this video. I already have waxed philosophical about the situation with Vegan Gains deleting his YouTube channel. I've done kind of the whole range from slightly philosophical to concise and to the point, and then we did a series of videos that were satire. It is peculiar for me to reflect on the extent to which Vegan Gains and I in the past had some kind of friendship, that we were colleagues to some extent. Melissa, my girlfriend, is here off camera. I remember really talking to Richard, and, I was talking to him as a friend, whether or not he felt the friendship was mutual. I remember really talking to him as a friend when I was first seducing Melissa, whatever you want to say, when we were first falling in love, talking to him about what was going on in that relationship. I remember then, several months later, with Melissa, we were looking for gifts to buy Richard and his wife, so that when we came back to Canada, we'd have a gift to buy him. And I actually consider, when I first saw this very shirt, so this is a sweater, it's a, whatever you want to say, I wear this to the gym, and it says, "Me, sarcastic, never." And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, wow, that would be funny. We could get matching shirts for Richard and his wife, And, we ended up buying them for ourselves. But I remember, I believe I said at the time, approximately, I was like, oh, do you think we should also buy a couple of these to give to Richard so we have a gift for him? And, we were living in China. Richard is a little bit of it. Oh, and also just say, obviously Richard has way more muscle mass than me. I thought I could buy him the same size, and he'd pop out of it more. I thought it'd be a good shirt for him that way too, and maybe the sentiment would suit him. Richard's a little bit of a Japanophile. He's a little bit into Japanese culture, Japanese pop culture at least. And I remember, thinking about buying him a gift in China or Asia, trying to get him something that would appeal to him. So, on some level, we were friends and colleagues. And, in the past, I've appreciated the support he's shown me. And if you ask the question, why didn't I read this letter on the internet earlier? Look, my criticism of Richard has been constant and continuous. But yes, it felt a little bit different when I could share my comments and criticisms and my advice with him directly and get a reply from him directly, which was the case in the past. So I've reached out to him and been friends with a whole range of very troubled people through YouTube. So to give you guys an instructive contrast, there was a time when Little Cheetah used to be known as Vegan Cheetah. Little Cheetah had a big controversy for using the N-word on the internet. And at that time, he was not openly racist. At that time, he just used it as an exclamation. Like, the famous clip was of him. He was looking at a photograph of a beautiful woman, and he just shouted out the N-word about how attractive she was. He wasn't insulting. He was just using this, it's inappropriate and so on. And a lot of people were freaking out. And I talked to him about it directly. And I remember he just said to me, this is not that much, he said, look, he's somebody with no education. He's been in and out of jail his whole life. He has a long criminal record, starting from high school, I think, criminal record. And he said, look, that for him, using the N-word that way, not as an insult, but just as an exclamation, that's something he got so used to doing during his years in jail that, he wasn't claiming it was right or good, but that was... So again, when you have that kind of contact with somebody, it's very different. Doesn't even mean they have a good reason, but you hear their reasons, you hear their perspective. So, I didn't have a lot of hope that Richard would get better. I mean, I haven't feel bad. I had no hope Richard would improve. Maybe, I mean, I was going to say that's another reason not to bother criticizing him. When you really just feel there's no chance this person is going to improve in any way, then what's the point? And, you know, I've never been here on YouTube as a fame whore. I'm really not interested in attention for the sake of attention. Some of you won't believe me, but if you look back over the history of this channel, or those of you who know me online, you know, ultimately the main thing I felt for Richard was pity. And, you know, then after a certain point, in terms of, people have asked me, sincerely enough, why did you guys stop being friends? And I think the truth is Richard really can't stand talking to anyone who challenges his opinion of himself. And, you know, he really thinks he's a genius. He really thinks he's someone with extraordinarily high intelligence. The same way that back when he was an ice hockey player, he thought he had superhuman strength. You guys may have heard him describing that, you know, on his own channel. You know, and he blames everyone else for his failures and shortcomings except himself. He doesn't take responsibility for anything. He is not interested in growing up. He's not interested in improving. He's not even interested in improving as a filmmaker. So, yeah, I mean, I can't say that the criticism of him was ever lacking on this channel. I remember very clearly putting up a criticism that had clips of that video he can't remember. He just can't remember what's in it that YouTube flagged him for. Well, I remember, you know, that video that has a title just like a whole bunch of stuff. I believe that's the video I put up clips of, where I was directly warning him. I was directly speaking to Richard and the audience and saying, look, this is you. He was unloading bags and boxes of weapons on camera and making unsavory remarks while he did it. You know, what are you trying to do? Do you want to be a leader in the vegan movement? Do you want to be a comedian? Do you want to be a filmmaker? Do you want to be a bodybuilding coach? You know, I don't care. You can be anything. You can go, of course, one of the first conversations I had with him was, you can go back to school and get a degree in nutrition or something, nutritional science. You could go back and get these credentials. In Canada, it's pretty straightforward and it's pretty affordable. It's much easier than the United States of America or some other countries. And he didn't want any of that. He wanted to do whatever he wanted to do whenever he wanted to do it, and he did not want to listen to anyone else's opinion, anyone who had a contrasting opinion about anything. And you guys already know the reason he said to me why he cut off all friendship and contact with me was because of what I said against racism. And, you know, Richard's Canadian. Richard comes from Toronto, Canada. He grew up in the shadow of genocide, the same history of the British Empire and genocide that I grew up in. I have a lot of videos on this channel talking about Cree, Ojibwe, Mohawk, Indigenous languages, the importance of that in understanding current politics of Canada and history of Canada. I don't know to what extent it's that element of racism and anti-racism, and I don't know to what extent it's just his personal connection to certain far right-wing figures like Corey McCarthy and Tara McCarthy. I don't know, and I don't care. And look, you know, the threats of violence thing, I remember Melissa saying to me after Vegan Gains started hating me on the internet. This is almost 2 years ago. Not quite, whatever, year and a half ago or something. But I remember Melissa saying to me, she was afraid to go to Toronto. She was like, is Vegan Gains going to actually come after us? Is he actually going to try to beat us up or stab us or hurt us or something? So, you know, that was real fear on her part. Now, I know Richard better than she knows Richard, so I have some feeling about that. But the other side of it is, when I first talked about Richard on this channel, I don't know how many years ago, when I first talked about Richard on YouTube, I did assume that a lot of his violent act was a joke. Like when he talked about wanting to kill children and babies, when he made these kinds of really, I assume it was a joke. And now I know it's not a joke. I have a daughter. I have sent Richard photographs. You know, again, I don't know, a year ago, whatever it was, not recently. I've sent him photographs of me with my daughter, me on vacation, visiting my daughter, right? The way I do with friends. I send friends photos of me with my daughter. And, what he writes back absolutely confirms that, no, what he's been saying about himself is not a joke. It's literally true. He has behaviors and beliefs and violent attitudes towards children and towards people that, that could get you put into a lunatic asylum, and that could certainly get you investigated by the Toronto Police Department, which is exactly what happened. Segue. I received the following letter. Hi, Eisel. My name is Mabel. I'm using a fake name for her. My name is Mabel. I'm a longtime viewer of vegan YouTubers since 2012, and I have been following a vegan lifestyle for the better part of the last 12 years. I am from Arizona, fake location, which is where I currently live. I am 22 years old. So this email was sent a couple of years ago. In light of recent events regarding you and your conflict with Durian Rider, I thought it might be beneficial to share my experience with Vegan Gains. I was not personally threatened or attacked by Richard, but after watching his videos for some time, observing his violent tendencies, rage, threats of physical harm to specific people, and to people in general, his talking about murder, his showing off real weapons, knives, guns, etc. in his videos, and so on, I felt concerned enough that I decided to do something. I wasn't sure if there was anything I could do, being an American citizen living in America, but I felt I at least had to try. Earlier this year, it was March or April 2016, I believe, I called the Toronto Police Department. I spoke to an officer for about an hour about Richard, his YouTube channel, the videos and statements he's made that concerned me, etc. Then I waited. Obviously, since it didn't directly involve me, I would have to check Richard's online accounts for any mention of police interaction. About a week after I made the call, Richard commented in a video that his room was such a mess because he had been raided by the police. There are a few mentions of the police quote-unquote harassing him in other videos following this one. He says that he will explain why the cops came to his house, but he never ended up sharing publicly why it happened, as far as I know. So, to my knowledge, again, this is a strange connection to me, I believe the first time Richard mentioned on the internet how serious his problem with the police was actually was in his interview he did with me. So it's briefly in there. This is on my YouTube channel, but we did a Skype conversation. He doesn't talk much. He is not an easy person to do a live conversation with. That's the other sad thing about Richard. I don't know. He has a history of concussion. He has a history of brain injury. He has a history of hallucination. I don't know if it's something like autism. That's also his problem. It is very, very hard. If those of you can remember, I'm sure this video is still up, the interview he originally did with the amazing atheist on the Drunken Peasants, he did seem autistic. In my attempt to talk to him over Skype, it was very, very hard to get the basic kind of eye-to-eye reaction we take for granted. I don't know. I do not know to what extent his problems are based on a medically real brain problem linked to the hallucination and other obvious symptoms he observes, a medically real problem like autism, or just brain damage from concussion. And the last one is something people very easily underrate the significance of in our society. And I'll never know. But yeah, as I said before, fundamentally, I pity him. So I continue reading this email. I am certain that the police coming to his house and checking in on him on later occasions, at least once more, is a direct result of the call I made. It scares me to think that no one bothered to call the police before, even people he actually threatened to kill, Mr. Repsian being one of them, who, incidentally, never called the police or took legal action, or so it seems. So she says of herself that she was raised by cop-hating, super-liberal parents. And she is not an authority-trusting person. It has to be something I deem very serious in order for me to even consider contacting the authorities. Having studied psychology for a fair bit, so I assume she has a university degree, I don't know. I saw in Richard something similar to many of the young mass shooters of the last 20 years, and I felt I couldn't stay silent about it. I just couldn't risk it. What if he was serious in his threats? The term quote-unquote deranged individual was one of the few things listed on the Toronto Police Department's website. They posted a list of the things they would like you to report as a member of the public. I felt that was fitting. Anyway, I just wanted to share this with you and show that it is important to take legal action and to take action when something is not right or unjust. Okay? She says a few more words and then wraps it up. She gives me permission to use this to make a video and asks that I don't use her real name. Some other details like this. At the time I received this message years ago, it's not that I took it any less seriously than I do today. However, the question in my mind was, to what extent, when we see Richard on camera, are we seeing an actor in a comedy playing a fictional character, and to what extent are we seeing the real man? Like I said, the whole sketch, the comedy he did about babies, but then you have a real-life incident where he gets into an altercation with someone at a restaurant. I forget if it was a restaurant or a coffee shop in Kensington Market in Toronto, and there's this, or the reaction he has when I send him a picture of me with my daughter, etc. It becomes clear. I think everyone who's known the guy, even if you've just known him via Facebook and what have you, I think it becomes clear to everyone over time that it's not an act, that it's not a joke. And my charitable assumption that he was a fictional character in a kind of long-running series of jokes of his own devising is not true at all. So, yeah. And I say that as someone who engages in quite a lot of self-parody, self-criticism, self-ridicule. My own life, all too often, feels like a series of running jokes of my own devising, and certainly my YouTube channel does also. Perhaps the most pathetic denouement to this story of all the people who write in telling me that what I'm doing here on YouTube is motivated by jealousy. Take a look at the life Richard lives under this heading of doing whatever it is he wants to do whenever he wants to do it. There is nothing there for me to feel jealous of. Nothing at all.